Welcome to the Midnight Codex, where forgotten truths breathe and shadows tell their tale. Tonight, don't blink and don't look behind you.
I should have never taken that call. I should have ignored the voice at the other end. But now, there's no going back. If you're reading this, just know I tried to warn you. It's not too late to walk away. It's not too late to leave. The wind outside howled against the walls of my small apartment. It was one of those nights where the chill seeped through every crack and crevice, no matter how tightly I sealed the windows. I sat hunched over my desk, fingers hovering above the keyboard. A pile of unopened bills and past due notices sat beside me like silent witnesses to my failure. My bank account had been empty for weeks, the last bit of savings long gone. I had a job, or rather, I had had a job. But that was before my company closed its doors without warning. I had been in the tech world long enough to know that my skill set was becoming obsolete, that my opportunities were slipping away like sand through my fingers. I was lost, adrift, and the weight of the world was pressing down on me. I'd tried everything, applied to countless jobs, sent out resumes to companies that probably didn't even exist anymore. Nothing, no callbacks, no hope. But then, that night, the phone rang. I almost didn't pick it up. I figured it was another bill collector or worse, a friend asking why I hadn't paid them back yet. I could barely bring myself to answer. But something made me do it. Maybe it was the desperation. Maybe it was the eerie silence of my apartment pressing in on me like the walls were closing in. "Hello?" I croaked, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. A long pause. Then, the voice on the other end of the line. "Jack Turner?" It was a low, calm voice, the kind that could make your skin crawl if you listened too long. "Yes, this is Jack." "Who's this?" The voice didn't respond immediately, almost as if it were studying me, analyzing my very essence. And when it spoke again, its words seemed to echo in my mind. "We have a job offer for you, a position you might be interested in. It's simple work, but it requires someone with the right disposition. You see, we're in need of a night watchman." I leaned forward. This wasn't a cold call. It wasn't a telemarketer. It felt wrong. But I was desperate, and when you're desperate, you'll grab anything that might save you. "A night watchman," I repeated, trying to sound uninterested, but my voice gave me away. "Where?" The voice on the other end was calm, almost detached, but the words that followed struck me like a punch in the gut. "At a mansion. It's isolated, in a remote part of town. You'll be responsible for securing the premises overnight." I was about to ask for more details when the voice cut me off. "The pay is substantial, enough to clear any debts you may have. We've already checked your financial history. You'll find that this job will solve all your problems." My heart raced. They'd checked my financial history? How did they know so much about me? The voice continued, unaffected by my growing unease. "But there are rules you must follow. Very specific rules. Failure to follow them will lead to consequences." I swallowed hard. "What kind of rules?" "5 rules," the voice said slowly, each word dripping with the weight of finality. "You'll receive the details when you arrive. For now, know this. Break the rules, and you'll suffer. Keep the rules, and you will be safe." The line went silent again, and I felt a chill in the air that I couldn't explain. The room seemed colder somehow, darker. I could hear the faintest whispers coming from the other end, like a distant wind. But when I pressed my ear closer to the phone, there was nothing but static. I took a deep breath. What choice did I have? The bills were piling up, the pressure was unbearable, and this job might be my only way out. I didn't care about the mansion or the strange phone call. All I cared about was the money. "All right," I said, trying to sound confident. "I'll take the job." The voice on the other end chuckled softly, a sound that sent a chill down my spine. "Good," it said, the word echoing in my ears. "We'll send you the details. Be there tonight. But remember, the rules are non-negotiable." The phone clicked, and the line went dead. I sat there for a long moment, the phone still pressed to my ear, staring at the darkness around me. The room seemed to close in on me, the shadows creeping in at the edges of my vision, but I was too numb to feel anything but the crushing weight of my own need. I had no other choice. I had to go. As I packed my things and left the apartment, a feeling gnawed at the pit of my stomach, something I couldn't shake. I told myself it was just the nerves. Everyone gets nervous before starting something new, right? But the closer I got to the mansion, the more the feeling of dread settled in. The road to the house was barely wide enough for my car, and as I drove deeper into the woods, the trees seemed to press in around me, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal hands, trying to pull me into the darkness. The mansion loomed ahead, towering over the land like a forgotten relic of another age. Its windows were dark, lifeless, and the air around it seemed to hum with an unnatural stillness. I couldn't see anything beyond the front gates, no lights in the distance, no sign of life. I pulled up to the front entrance and got out, my footsteps crunching on the gravel. The mansion felt wrong, like something was watching me. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, but I shook it off. It was just nerves, right? The job would be simple. I just had to survive the night, follow the rules, and get paid. But when the door swung open and the overseer appeared, standing there like a shadow himself, I knew that something far darker was at play. He didn't smile. He didn't greet me. He just handed me a piece of paper. My rules, and whispered, "Remember, you've been warned." The rules were simple, but the way he said it made them feel like a curse. I stood there in the dim light of the hallway, holding the paper with trembling hands, reading the 5 rules that would dictate my fate. Rule 1, never leave the gates open after dark. Rule 2, if you hear chanting, do not investigate. Rule 3, always lock the east wing at midnight. Rule 4, never, under any circumstances, engage with the guests who arrive after midnight. Rule 5, if the bell tolls, do not answer the door. I didn't understand. I couldn't understand. But as I looked at the overseer's cold, unblinking eyes, I realized I didn't have the luxury of questioning. I had already accepted my fate the moment I stepped through those gates, and as the mansion door closed behind me, I wondered if it would be the last time I ever saw the outside world. The house, I realized, was a monster that never slept. As I stepped inside, a chill ran down my spine. It was as if every brick, every stone, was steeped in some dark memory, some secret that had been buried for far too long. The musty smell of decay hung in the air, blending with something sharper, something metallic that I couldn't quite place. But it wasn't just the house's physical state that unsettled me. It was the feeling, the overwhelming sensation that something was watching me. The walls seemed to whisper, the shadows seemed to move. There was an invisible presence that made me feel smaller with every step I took. The overseer led me through the dimly lit hallway. His steps were silent, and his presence somehow made the house feel even darker, even colder. I could hear my own breath as I followed him, my heart pounding in my chest, every footstep echoing like the ticking of a clock. And then he stopped in front of a large wooden table, its surface worn and aged, the wood groaning under the weight of the years. He turned, his pale eyes locking with mine. Without a word, he reached into a drawer and pulled out a yellowed, crumpled piece of paper. "This is the list of rules you must follow while you are here," he said, his voice calm, unyielding. "Failure to obey them will have consequences you cannot understand." I glanced down at the paper, my fingers trembling slightly as I took it from him. The rules were simple, yet their weight felt like a burden I wasn't prepared to carry. The paper smelled old, as if it had been waiting for someone like me to take it and seal my fate. I could feel my heartbeat quicken. Rule 1. Do not leave the front gates open after dark. I read the first rule aloud, trying to make sense of it. Leave the gates closed after dark? What happens if they're open? The overseer didn't answer immediately. He simply stared at me, his eyes like cold stone, as though measuring my every thought. When the gates are open, you invite them inside, and they are not what you think they are. His words hung in the air, thick with threat. I swallowed hard, unable to speak. It wasn't a warning. It was a decree. The kind of thing you follow or face the consequences, without question. His tone made it clear. The gates weren't just barriers. They were walls against something far worse. Rule 2. If you hear chanting, do not investigate. Chanting. My throat went dry as I read the second rule aloud. Chanting. What does that even mean? The overseer's expression remained unchanged. You'll know it when you hear it. The walls will tremble and the air will thicken. But no matter what, do not approach it. Do not investigate. Curiosity will cost you. I felt a chill crawl over my skin as I imagined the sound. The kind of chant that sent a shiver through your spine. A dark, foreign sound that would be impossible to ignore. And yet, I was being told not to go near it. Why? What kind of thing would make the walls tremble? His eyes met mine, his unblinking gaze almost daring me to question further. Trust me when I say, there are things in this house you do not want to know. His words left a strange taste in my mouth, like the bitter aftertaste of something poisonous. Rule 3. Always lock the east wing at midnight. The next rule seemed straightforward, but it felt oddly ominous. Lock the east wing? Why? The overseer paused, his eyes hardening as he regarded me. That part of the house is unstable. You cannot understand it, and you should never open it. When the clock strikes midnight, you will lock the doors and leave them locked, always. If you fail, there will be no going back. I felt a cold knot in my stomach. The east wing. What was so important about it? What could possibly be so dangerous that I had to lock it away every night? But the overseer's silence was all the answer I needed. The warning was clear. This wasn't just a house. It was a prison. And I was its warden. Rule 4. Never, under any circumstances, engage with the guests who arrive after midnight. Guests? I frowned, the word unsettling me more than it should have. Guests? What kind of guests? The overseer's voice lowered, becoming colder, more menacing. You will not see them. They will not knock in the way you expect. But when you hear the door, do not answer. Do not speak to them. They are not human, and they do not seek your kindness. I couldn't understand. What kind of guests would come at such a strange hour? What did he mean by not human? But as I met his gaze, I felt something deep inside me twist in warning. It wasn't a normal warning. It was a primal one, a feeling that something was coming, something dark. If you answer the door, he continued, his voice barely above a whisper, it will be the last thing you do. Do not look, do not speak, and do not trust them. Rule 5. If the bell tolls, do not answer the door. The final rule felt like a punch to the gut. A bell. What bell? I looked at the overseer, searching for some explanation, but he didn't give me one. His eyes seemed to darken, the shadows around him deepening as he spoke. You will hear it. When the bell tolls, everything changes. Do not answer. Do not move. Stay still, and do not make a sound. I blinked, trying to process what he was saying. But what is it? What happens when the bell tolls? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned, walking slowly toward the window. The room seemed to get colder with every step he took. You will know when it happens, he said quietly, almost as if to himself, and when you do, it will already be too late. As I finished reading the last rule, the air in the room felt heavier. My hands shook slightly as I set the paper down on the table, my mind spinning. These rules, they weren't just odd, they were wrong. They spoke of things that didn't belong in the world I knew. And yet, the overseer's words had a finality to them. He didn't offer explanations, only commands. His eyes told me everything I needed to know. This was not a house you walked through without paying the price. But what choice did I have? I couldn't walk away now, not when the pay was so much, not when there was no other way out. I had already crossed the threshold. The rules were my chains, and I had to obey if I wanted to survive. I stood, my legs unsteady, and turned toward the hallway. As I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every creak of the floor, every flicker of the candlelight felt like a silent observer lurking in the dark corners of the house. The paintings on the walls seemed to follow my every move, their eyes cold and empty, but I could have sworn they weren't quite the same as before. In the distance, I thought I heard a faint sound. Footsteps, perhaps. But when I turned, there was no one there. Only shadows. And then, just as I reached the door to the room they'd assigned me, a cold gust of wind slammed against the window, rattling it in its frame. I froze. It wasn't the wind. Something or someone was watching me. The rules. I didn't know if they would save me or condemn me. But one thing was clear. The house would not let me leave without paying the price. The mansion felt like it was breathing around me, alive yet not alive. Every corner seemed to conceal something waiting to emerge, and every creak of the floor beneath my feet sounded like a warning. It was my first night on duty, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was observing me, anticipating my every move. Each step forward felt like a step deeper into something I couldn't fully comprehend. The air inside was thick, almost suffocating. The temperature fluctuated, sometimes cold enough to see my breath, other times stiflingly warm. And yet, through it all, there was a silence that weighed down on me like a thick fog. My thoughts felt distant, my senses dulled, as if something was suppressing my awareness. I glanced at my watch. Midnight was drawing near. I had no reason to feel afraid. I was here to do a job. Just follow the rules. The rules. Don't open the gates after dark, lock the east wing. Don't speak to the guests after midnight. If the bell tolls. The weight of these instructions sat heavily in my mind, and I could feel their presence like a physical force pressing on me. I took a deep breath and started down the hallway, determined to complete my duties. The walls seemed to stretch longer the further I walked, the shadows hanging at strange angles. The flickering light from the candles cast unsettling shadows on the walls. I stopped at the grand staircase, my feet frozen. At the top, there was a portrait, a faded image of a man dressed in an old-fashioned suit. His eyes, painted as cold and empty as the stone walls, seemed to follow me wherever I went. I didn't want to look too long. My skin crawled as I turned away. As I moved down the hall, a soft, distinct rustling sound reached my ears. My heartbeat quickened. At first I thought it was the wind, but the sound was coming from the other side of the hallway, and there was no window nearby. I turned my head to see if there was a shadow or a shape moving, but nothing. The hallway ahead was empty, yet the rustling continued, now more distinct, like footsteps, or something brushing against the walls. I couldn't tell if it was the house settling or something far worse. Then, the whispering began. Faint, like voices from a distant room, murmuring in some language I couldn't understand. It wasn't coming from one spot, but from all directions, as if the walls themselves were talking. The whispering intensified as I moved further down the hall, each voice layering over the last, until it became a chorus of murmurs in a language too ancient for me to recognize. They seemed to be calling my name, Jack. But it wasn't my voice. It wasn't anyone's voice. I quickly forced myself to keep moving. My feet felt heavy, like I was walking through thick mud. I could almost hear the floorboards creaking in rhythm with my steps, and every inch of the dark hall seemed to close in on me. It was as though the house was pulling me forward, nudging me, urging me to discover its secrets. But I wasn't ready. At that moment, I noticed something strange. The light from the candles seemed to shift. As if the shadows stretched toward me, the flickering glow became more erratic, casting eerie, disjointed shadows. A figure, tall, dark, stood in the far corner of the hallway near the stairs. It didn't move at first, it just stood there, too still, too unnatural. I stopped dead in my tracks. My breath caught in my throat. It didn't look like a person at all. It was all shadows and dark shapes, no discernible features. My body told me to run, but I couldn't move. The figure seemed to be watching me, almost as if it were waiting for something. But what? And then, as quickly as it appeared, it vanished. Just a flicker, like a shadow dissolving into the darkness. My heart pounded in my chest as I glanced around. Nothing. It was gone. I tried to shake it off. Focus, Jack. Just follow the rules. I turned my attention back to the hallway ahead. The clock's ticking echoed louder now as the seconds ticked toward midnight. The air around me was dense, and I felt it pressing in, heavy on my chest. The whispering had stopped, but the silence that followed was worse. The house seemed to be waiting, like a predator holding its breath. I moved cautiously, keeping my eyes ahead. But then I heard it. A faint hollow sound, like footsteps, but too measured, too deliberate. They came from the floor above me. I froze. The footsteps continued, slow and rhythmic, like someone walking down the hall above. I was sure I was alone on the floor. Had I missed someone? Was it a guest? No, it couldn't be. The footsteps were getting closer. I didn't want to move, didn't want to look up, but I had no choice. I stared upward, but the staircase was dark. It was empty. The sound stopped abruptly. I was left standing there, the hairs on my neck standing on end, my breath coming in shallow bursts. The overwhelming sense of being watched pressed on me again. Something or someone was in this house with me, and it wasn't human. I continued my rounds, passing the east wing's locked doors, my hand brushing against the cold brass key. But the rules, those damn rules, were rattling in my mind. What had I just seen? What was in the house with me? Was I imagining things, or was there something here that I had no control over? The voices had returned, faint whispers in the walls, but louder now, like something just out of reach. I tried to block them out, but they seemed to surround me, pressing on me from all sides. Is this real? I thought, or am I losing my mind? I clenched my fists, trying to focus. Just get through the night, lock the doors, follow the rules. But even as I repeated the words in my head, I could feel myself slipping. It's all in my head, Jack. Just keep going. But the more I told myself that, the more the house seemed to push back, as if the rules themselves were an anchor pulling me deeper into madness. My own thoughts, twisted and distorted by fear, started to turn on me. The walls closed in. The shadows became real. Something was moving in them. Then the bell tolled. It rang once, deep and resonant, vibrating through the house. It seemed to shake the very air, and my whole body stiffened in response. No, 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 I thought. The overseer's voice echoed in my mind. If the bell tolls, do not answer the door. I turned to face the hallway. The door at the end was ajar. Something, or someone, was waiting for me on the other side. And just as the clock struck midnight, I felt it. The weight of fate pressing down, my breath caught in my throat. I wasn't alone anymore. The mansion felt like a creature in the dark, its pulse thrumming through the walls, through the air, through me. Every corner I turned, the weight of its presence pressed against me, the silence louder than any scream. The east wing door stood before me, and in that moment, it seemed to hum with a dark promise. I knew I shouldn't have opened it, the rules, but curiosity had its claws in me, pulling at my very soul. The whispers were unbearable, the voices calling my name. Jack. Jack. I had no choice. The rules felt like a cage now, suffocating me, pushing me toward the very thing I feared most. I couldn't deny the urge to see what lay behind that door. I wasn't thinking clearly. My hands trembled as I inserted the cold brass key into the lock, the sensation sharp and almost electrifying. The key turned with a loud click, and the door creaked open. The moment I stepped into the east wing, I knew I had made a mistake. The air changed. It wasn't just cold, it was suffocating, oppressive, as if the very atmosphere inside the room had weight. I felt like I was being smothered by invisible hands. But it wasn't just the temperature that struck me. It was the stillness. The kind of silence that made every sound, even the softest exhale, feel like a scream. I could barely breathe. The door slammed behind me, but there was no wind, no draft. It was as though the house itself had sealed me in. I stood there, frozen, feeling the weight of 1,000 eyes upon me, yet there was nothing. No sound, nothing but the thick silence. And then it started. The walls began to bleed. It wasn't like anything I had ever imagined. There was no bright red, no crimson pools forming on the floor. Instead, it was darker, almost black, like the house itself was bleeding something ancient and old. The liquid oozed slowly from the cracks in the walls, as if the house had been wounded and was now weeping in slow, deliberate streams. I couldn't look away. The dark fluid crept down the walls, pooling at the floor in thick rivulets that looked too alive. I took a step back, my heart hammering. My hand reached for the door handle, but it was gone. The door had vanished, just like the figure in the hallway. There was no escape. I was trapped. The whispering began again, louder this time. It wasn't just one voice, it was thousands. Jack, Jack, Jack. Each whisper sounded like it was coming from a different direction, echoing off the walls, reverberating in my skull. I covered my ears, but the sound wasn't in my ears. It was inside me, around me. What have I done? The walls were suffocating me. My breath was quick and shallow. I wanted to run, to escape this nightmare, but my legs wouldn't move. Something was stopping me, keeping me here, forcing me to witness this madness. Then the figure appeared. It wasn't human. It was something more, something ancient and wrong. It stood at the far end of the room, cloaked in shadow, its silhouette. Impossibly tall. Its features were blurred, its face a void. I couldn't even tell if it was a person or something else. Its presence felt like a weight pressing against me, a force I couldn't understand. It moved toward me, not walking, but gliding across the floor, too smooth, too unnatural. My heart pounded louder in my chest, each beat drowning out the whispers. My body screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move. I couldn't even blink. The figure didn't stop. It just kept coming, its dark shape growing larger, filling my vision. And then, the knock. The knock came from the door behind me. I spun around, my head swimming with terror. There was no one there. The hallway was empty. The knock came again, louder, more urgent, like a command. I stumbled back, my pulse racing, my chest tightening with panic. I had violated the rules. I'd opened the door, and now the mansion was retaliating. I'd crossed a line, and the consequences were unfolding before me, like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. I backed up until my legs hit the wall, and I could feel the heat radiating from the black liquid seeping into the floor. The whispers were relentless, deafening. But as I stood there, trembling, I noticed something else. The shadows were moving. They weren't just shadows. They were alive. The shadows in the room began to twist, stretch, and distort, slowly forming shapes. I couldn't look away. It was as though the very walls were bending, pulling themselves inward, and the shadows were pulling the room apart. Figures began to emerge from the darkness, ghastly shapes, indistinct, their forms shifting like smoke. They moved silently, gliding closer, one after another, as if they had always been there, waiting for me to open the door. I tried to scream, but my throat was tight. The room was closing in, the shadows pushing forward, and then the figure, the one that had been standing motionless before, took a step toward me. Its presence filled the room, an overwhelming sense of something ancient and evil suffocating me. The whispers grew louder, closer. They weren't just in the air anymore. They were in my mind, in my blood. I could hear them clearly now. Jack. Jack. You shouldn't have come. The walls were bleeding, the shadows were moving, the whispers were turning into screams. The house was alive, and it was angry. I couldn't hold on any longer. I'd broken the rules. I looked up, desperate for any escape, and then I saw it. The figure moving towards me, its arms outstretched, its mouth opening wide. But there was nothing there but darkness. And then, just as I thought I was going to be swallowed whole, the room exploded with sound. The bell tolled. It wasn't just a sound. It was a force, a pulse that ripped through the mansion, shaking the very foundations of the house. The walls cracked, the shadows writhed and screamed, and as the bell tolled louder, everything in the room, Everything in the house seemed to snap. The air turned cold. The shadows stopped moving. The whispers silenced. I was left standing there, panting, covered in sweat, my heart still racing. The house was still, eerily quiet, but I knew something had changed. The mansion no longer felt like a place. It had become something else, a dark, living entity, wrapping itself around me, pulling me deeper into its endless maze. The air was thick, heavy with the weight of centuries of secrets, and I could feel it pressing against my chest, squeezing the breath from me. The walls creaked and groaned, bending and shifting in ways they shouldn't. The mansion was alive, and it was waiting. Every step I took only seemed to bring me further into its depths, deeper into its suffocating embrace. The once familiar hallways twisted and turned, stretching impossibly far. There was no longer any clear way out. My mind raced as I tried to piece together what was happening, but all I could hear were the whispers. The voices were louder now, more insistent, more urgent. Jack, Jack, Jack. I had read the book. I had found the truth, buried in its pages, written in a language older than time. The mansion, this place, it had been built for one purpose only: to trap a soul, to serve as the site for an ancient ritual that demanded a sacrifice. And now, I was that sacrifice. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't random. I had been chosen. The truth hit me like a wave, drowning me in its terrible weight. The overseer had been playing me all along. He wasn't just some strange employer. He was the keeper of the ritual, the one who had orchestrated everything. Every rule I had followed, every warning I had heeded, those weren't just precautions. They were part of the plan. I was the final piece. I had been lured here, drawn into this house by something older than time itself. The mansion had wanted me. The mansion needed me. The realization sent a chill through me. I was not just in danger. I was the danger. I was the key. I backed away from the book, my mind reeling, but it didn't help. The house, the mansion, was already changing. The air grew colder and the shadows deepened, stretching toward me as if they were alive. The walls seemed to bend inward, pressing on me, squeezing me tighter with every breath. I was trapped. I stumbled to the center of the room, the floor groaning beneath my feet as if it were alive too. The whispers in the walls had intensified, no longer whispers but screams, agonizing, desperate, as though the house itself was calling for its final sacrifice. Then I saw it. A door, hidden in the corner of the room, shrouded in darkness. It stood there, waiting. The air around it crackled with a strange electric energy, as if the door itself was a threshold between this world and something much darker. My hand moved toward it, as if controlled by some unseen force, but I hesitated. I knew what it meant. I knew what would happen if I opened it. But I couldn't stop. I reached for the door. It was too late. The moment I touched the handle, everything changed. The walls began to pulse with an otherworldly energy, and I heard it again. The sound of the mansion's breath. The air became thick, suffocating, the temperature plummeting to an unbearable chill. I tried to pull away from the door, but it was no use. The shadows, they were alive now. They crawled along the floor, moving towards me, becoming shapes, figures, their features indistinct but unmistakably wrong. This wasn't just a house anymore. It was a living, breathing nightmare. The whispers returned, no longer just faint echoes, but a chorus of voices, all chanting my name. Jack, Jack, Jack. They filled the room, their volume growing louder, overlapping, becoming one voice, one terrible voice, an endless scream. And as the noise reached a fever pitch, I realized what was happening. I was becoming part of it. The house was claiming me. I'd opened the door, the final door, and in doing so, I'd opened the gateway for the ritual to unfold. The figure appeared again. At first, it was just a flicker in the shadows, but then it grew larger, its shape more defined, though still shrouded in darkness. It was tall, impossibly tall, its limbs elongated, its eyes, if you could call them eyes, dark voids, sucking in the light around it. It moved toward me. slowly, deliberately, like a predator to its prey. I couldn't move. My legs were rooted to the floor, my body frozen by a force I couldn't understand. And then I heard it. The knock. The knock at the door. But there was no door anymore. It was as if the mansion itself was knocking, a sound that vibrated through my very bones. The walls shook, the air thickened, the shadows seemed to reach out, grabbing hold of me, pulling me into the darkness. I'd broken the rules, I'd opened the door, and now the mansion was going to claim me. The figure in the corner reached toward me, its fingers impossibly long, its hand closing in, but I couldn't move. The mansion, it, had already claimed me. I felt the ground shift beneath me, and the shadows swallowed me whole. There was no more room to run, no more chance to escape. The whispers were now inside me, in my mind, in my blood. The house had taken root in me, and there was no going back. The ritual was unfolding, and I was the center of it. The mansion, the ritual, the overseer, they had all conspired to bring me here. And now I was just a vessel for an ancient evil. The figure moved closer. The darkness closed in. And as the house breathed, I realized that my fate had been sealed long before I had ever stepped inside this cursed place. The mansion felt like it was closing in on me, its walls shifting, breathing as if it were alive. Every breath I took was a struggle, the air heavy with an oppressive force that seemed to seep into my lungs and suffocate my thoughts. I was no longer walking through a house. I was inside a living nightmare, a prison built from the very fabric of my fear. The shadows in the corners of the rooms stretched toward me like cold hands, pulling me deeper into the mansion's unrelenting grip. I had broken the rules. The realization hit me with the weight of 1,000 stones, and I could feel my mind begin to crack under the pressure. The whispers had stopped being subtle, soft voices in the walls. They were now thunderous, booming inside my skull, each one a command, a plea, a warning. Jack, Jack, Jack. They were all calling for me, drawing me in, urging me to accept my fate. The mansion was alive, and it was feeding on my fear, my guilt, my despair. I could feel it now, the truth. The ritual had already begun. The overseer's cryptic warnings, the rules I had followed and broken, the ancient book I had found, they had all led me to this moment. I had been chosen, not by chance, but by design. I was the sacrifice, the key to unlocking the ancient evil that lay hidden in the heart of the mansion. The mansion wasn't just a house, it was a prison, a tomb, built to contain something dark and ancient. And now I was part of it. The walls, the floors, the shadows, they all belonged to this ritual, this ancient, terrible force that had been waiting for me. I wasn't just trapped inside the mansion. I was the very heart of its curse. The mansion shifted again, the air growing colder, the shadows more oppressive. I stumbled through the halls, my body shaking with fear, my thoughts scrambled. I couldn't remember how long I'd been wandering. Time had become a blur. Had it been hours, days, or had I been trapped here for longer than I cared to admit? I reached the center of the mansion, the place where everything had begun, the place where the ritual would unfold. The room felt familiar, but it was wrong, twisted in ways I couldn't explain. The shadows were thick here, swirling like smoke, and the air was thick with the stench of decay. It was as if the very walls were alive, pulsing with a dark energy that made my skin crawl. I could feel it then. The house was closing in on me. The ritual had already begun, and I was part of it. There was no escape. I tried to scream, but the words died in my throat. The air had become too thick, the shadows too heavy. My feet wouldn't move. I couldn't escape. I had been marked the moment I stepped into this place, the moment I had opened the door to the east wing. The house had claimed me, and now there was nothing I could do but accept my fate. But then I heard it. The bell tolled. It was low, deep, and resonated through the very floor beneath my feet. The sound was like a death knell, reverberating through the mansion, vibrating through my bones. It was a sound I had heard before, but now it felt different, final. The moment the bell tolled, I knew that there was no going back. I was no longer in control of my fate. The mansion shifted again, the walls groaning, the shadows flickering like fire. I felt something, someone, behind me. I turned, and there it was, the figure. The tall, dark shape that had haunted me from the moment I had stepped foot in this place. It wasn't just a shadow. It was a part of the house, a manifestation of the ritual, a guardian of the curse that had claimed me. The figure moved toward me, its form becoming clearer, its presence overwhelming. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. It reached out toward me, its hand long and claw-like, the fingers stretching impossibly far. I could feel the air grow colder as it touched me, its cold fingers slipping around my wrist like ice. I gasped, trying to pull away, but its grip was unyielding. The shadows closed in, the mansion closing in around me. Escape or madness? The words echoed in my mind, ringing louder than the bell tolling. There was no escape, no way out. The mansion had already claimed me. The ritual was unfolding. I was the key, the sacrifice. There was nothing I could do to change it. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the house pressing down on me, the shadows swallowing me whole. The figure loomed over me, its hollow eyes staring into mine, its presence suffocating, its power overwhelming. And then, the whispers began again. But this time, they were different. Obey the ritual. Embrace your fate. I tried to scream to fight, but it was too late. The mansion had already won.